What if I told you the mirror you've been staring into your whole life has been lying to you? That every crack, every shadow, every reflection you see isn't who you truly are, but who your doubts want you to be. For years, I believed the mirror. I believed I was small, unworthy, invisible. But one day, I broke it. And that was the day my life began to change forever. In the heart of Ijibu Ode, where red earth kissed the feet of barefoot children and cassava leaves rustled in the midday breeze, lived a girl named Enitan. She wasn't the loudest in her compound, nor the prettiest, nor the most talented, but she carried something no one else saw, a gift buried beneath years of doubt, a gift even she did not believe in. Her name, Enitan, meant person of story, but her own story had become a quiet whisper. She lived with her mother, Mama Ronk, a woman of fierce discipline and deep sighs. Since Enitan's father died, life had been a winding road of scraping and stretching. Every kobo counted. Every mistake had consequences. Eni, her mother would say, if you cannot be the best, then at least don't be a burden. And so, Enitan kept her dreams small, folded like paper and tucked into the corners of her thoughts. But dreams, like seeds, can't help but grow, even in dry soil. Enitan was 19, a school teacher in the local primary. She taught English to restless children who believed big grammar was the language of outsiders. But even they noticed something about her. Teacher Enitan, a boy named Khalid, once asked, "Why you day always look like say your mind day, fight itself?" She didn't answer, because he was right. Every day, Enitan stood in front of that chalkboard, but her real battle was behind her eyes, a voice that said, "They'll find out you're not good enough. You speak well, but who are you to teach others? You're just lucky they haven't fired you yet." Her outside was calm. Inside, a storm. One Friday evening, Enitan wandered into the old quarter of Ijibu Ode. Her feet led her to a rundown gallery with a faded sign that read, "The House of Inner Eyes, Olatunji, Painter of Souls." Curious, she stepped in. Inside, the room was filled with portraits, not of people but of feelings. A crying lion, a smiling ghost, a child made of broken glass. From the shadows, an old man emerged. His face was wrinkled, his hands stained with paint. "You see them?" he asked. "They're unusual," Enitan replied. "They're not what I painted," he said. "They're what my subjects believed about themselves. I only showed them the mirror." She blinked. Mirror. He led her to a small room at the back. On the wall hung a mirror, but it didn't reflect her body. Instead, it showed a dark fog, shifting, swirling. "That is the noise in your mind," the man said. Enitan turned to him. "Who are you?" "I am Olatunji, and I help people remember who they really are, before the world told them otherwise." Sometimes, in between lessons, he would pause to catch his breath, his hand resting lightly on the edge of a table. His smile was warm, but his eyes carried a certain tiredness, like a man who had poured too much of himself into others for too long. That night, Enitan couldn't sleep. She stared at her ceiling, thinking about the mirror. "The noise in your mind," Olatunji had said. Was that what she had lived with all these years? A mind filled with other people's voices? Her mother's warnings, her teacher's mockery, her classmates' laughter, her own echo of fear. She sat up. "I want to know what's really in me," she whispered. The next morning, she told her mother about the painter. Mama Ronk scoffed. "Eni, stop entertaining nonsense. That is how people lose focus in life. Mirror that cannot show face? Does it cook food? Does it pay rent? But mummy, forget dreams. Dreams don't pay NEPA bills. Just do your work and keep your head low." Enitan nodded, but something inside her had shifted. She realized her mother wasn't being cruel. She was just passing down her own fears, wrapped in caution. But Enitan had tasted something new, a possibility. Over the next weeks, she kept visiting Olatunji. Each time she looked into the mirror, the fog began to clear. She saw herself as a small girl, dancing with joy before being mocked. Herself winning a prize and downplaying it. Herself wanting to speak up, but choosing silence. And slowly, her thoughts changed. Olatunji taught her. The world you live in is filtered through the stories you tell yourself. Every thought is a seed. What you plant grows. Your mind is not a prison. It is a garden. Guard it. Cultivate it. Speak to it gently. She began journaling, speaking affirmations, saying no when she meant no. At first, it felt like lying. But soon, her outer world began to shift. She stood taller in class, applied for a writing program in Lagos, even corrected a parent who shouted at her in front of students. People noticed. But as with all journeys of the mind, the real test came when life pushed back. Enitan's application to the Lagos writing program was accepted, but with one catch: she had to speak on stage at a youth summit to qualify. Public speaking, the old voice returned. You'll freeze. They'll laugh. You're not ready. She stood in her small room, trembling. Then she walked to her mirror, not the magical one, but her own, and she whispered, I'm not my fear. I am not their judgment. I am what I choose to believe. The voice in her head softened, and for the first time, she smiled, not at her reflection, but at her mind. Enitan had begun to shape her reality, not by magic, but by intention. Her thoughts, once wild and cruel, were now seeds of courage. But the journey was far from over. For the mind, once awakened, must be guarded again and again. The Lagos road was long and hot, but Enitan's mind was louder than the honking Danfo horns and crying babies packed around her. She clutched her notepad like scripture, each word on the page a small stone holding down her fears. She was heading to the Youth Dreamers Summit, an event attended by over 500 young Nigerians and streamed live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Her topic? Becoming your thoughts, the power of inner belief. It was Olatunji who encouraged her to apply. You have walked through fire, Enitan, he said. Now, teach others how to hold their flame. But inside her, the shadow returned. You're a fraud. One stutter, and they'll see through you. She pressed her forehead against the glass window and whispered, Not today. Not this time. Lagos was a living thing. It didn't sleep. It didn't slow down. It chewed and spat. But for the first time, Enitan didn't feel swallowed by the noise. She felt awakened. At the summit's hotel venue, she received her badge. Speaker, Enitan Ronk Adebayo. She stared at it for minutes. It looked official. It looked wrong. It looked right. All at once. That night in her hotel room, she stood in front of the mirror again. There was no magic this time, only her voice. I have something worth saying, even if my voice shakes, even if my story isn't perfect. It matters. I matter. Enitan stepped onto the stage. She couldn't see the audience clearly, just a sea of eyes, a wave of potential judgment. She took a breath, then another, and then she began. There was a time I believed I had nothing to offer. Every day I told myself I was too small, too quiet, too unsure. I believed it so deeply that it became my reality, until I met someone who showed me a different mirror. A mirror that didn't reflect my face, but my thoughts. And what I saw there was pain, fear, and doubt planted by others, but watered by me. And so I began to pull out weeds and plant new seeds. Seeds like, I am enough. I'm allowed to grow. My thoughts are not facts. And slowly my life began to change. Because your thoughts shape your reality. Guard your mind like a garden. And choose what you grow. Silence. Then applause. Then roaring applause. Enitan smiled. It wasn't relief. It was release. After the event, a woman in a red scarf approached her. I'm Kechi Obiora, producer at Coastal Vibes FM. We need speakers like you on air. Are you interested in a feature interview? Enitan's mouth went dry. A year ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now, she nodded. Yes, I'd love that. Back in Ijibu Ode, Mama Ronk was frying akara when Enitan arrived home. She was calmer these days, slower to scold. Her back bent more than before, but her voice remained strong. So you went and talked in front of all of Lagos? She said with narrowed eyes. Enitan smiled. Yes, Mummy. And you didn't faint? No, Mummy. Mama Ronk didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Maybe you were stronger than I thought. That night, they sat outside under the moon, eating roasted corn and sharing silence. Mama Ronk didn't say much, but Enitan could feel the quiet pride radiating from her mother's stillness. 2 weeks later, Enitan was live on Coastal Vibes FM, seated across from a charismatic host named Nedu. "Welcome back," Nedu said to his audience. "Today we have a special guest, a schoolteacher turned speaker whose viral talk at the Youth Dreamers Summit has touched hearts across the country." He turned to her. "Enitan, how did you go from self-doubt to self-belief?" She took a deep breath. "It began when I realized that my worst enemy wasn't outside. It was inside me. And I decided to stop letting that voice speak for me. I started choosing different thoughts. And eventually, those thoughts chose a different me." The phone lines lit up. One call from Maury, one for Joss, another from Calabar. People called to thank her, to ask for advice, to share their fears. For the next few weeks, Enitan's phone buzzed daily. Former students sent messages. Strangers tagged her in posts about courage and self-belief. Nedu even invited her back for a follow-up segment. For a while, it felt like her words had built a small, steady fire across the country. But success has a shadow. The more she rose, the more exposed she felt. Social media buzzed. Some called her brilliant. Others called her shallow. Another motivational speaker with empty quotes. Does she even have a degree in psychology? She just knows how to talk sweet. One comment said, "She's nothing without that old painter's mirror. Take that away and see if she still shines." She told herself it was nonsense. But that night, lying in bed, she scrolled through the comments again. The words replayed in her head the next morning and the next. By the end of the week, the excitement that once got her out of bed early felt heavy, like lifting a stone. She stopped journaling, stopped her morning affirmations, stopped visiting Olatunji, and her old thoughts, like abandoned thieves, returned to reclaim the house. Maybe I am fake. Maybe I just got lucky. Maybe I have nothing original to offer. She canceled 2 speaking engagements, told Nedu she was taking a break. Even Mama Ronk noticed. "Enitan, your eyes look heavy again," she said one morning. "I'm just tired, Mummy." But it wasn't sleep she needed. It was clarity. One rainy afternoon, Enitan returned to Olatunji's gallery. But the place was empty, dust-covered, abandoned. A neighbor told her he had passed on just a few weeks before. Enitan stood in the gallery, surrounded by silent paintings. She found the old mirror in the back room. It was cracked now, down the middle. Still, she looked, and what she saw took her breath away. 2 reflections. One side showed her radiant, speaking confidently. The other, hunched, afraid, shrinking. She touched the glass and remembered Olatunji's voice. "What you feed will grow. What you ignore will fade. You are always shaping your reality, even when you do nothing." She fell to her knees. Tears came, not of shame, but recognition. She wasn't broken. She was just growing. Enitan stood up. The mirror may have cracked, but it still reflected truth. And the truth was this. She had the power to shape her world. And that power came from within. Not from applause. Not from praise. Not even from Olatunji, but from her own intention. And that could never be taken. 2 days after visiting the old gallery, Enitan received a parcel delivered by a bike rider. Inside was a handwritten note on thick, yellowed paper. It was from Olatunji. "My dear Enitan, if you are reading this, then I have passed into the space beyond thoughts. I knew one day you would return to the mirror, cracked or not. That mirror was never about what it showed, but about what you chose to see. You do not need the glass anymore, because now you are the mirror. Reflect light, reflect truth, reflect possibility. And when doubt returns, as it always will, stand before your own heart and say, I believe in what I am becoming." Olatunji. Enitan pressed the letter to her chest. Her tears this time were silent. Not of pain, not of fear, but of peace. A few months later, Enitan began a new kind of school. Not for children, but for young women. She called it the inner school. No uniforms, no grades, just mirrors on the walls, literal and metaphorical. Each session began with silence, then storytelling, then affirmations, then shared healing. Girls came from Ijibode, Sagamu, even Ibadan. Girls who had been silenced by shame, who had swallowed inferiority, who thought their worth depended on what others believed. And in Enitan's presence, they learned to speak again. One girl named Rofiat said, "I used to think my body was a mistake, but now I know my mind can be a home, a beautiful one." And Enitan would nod, because she understood. A Lagos publisher approached Enitan after hearing about the inner school. They offered her a book deal. "Write what you teach," they said. "Nigeria and the world needs it." She hesitated. Old thoughts knocked gently. Who are you to write a book? What if it flops? What if they say it's all empty talk? But she opened her journal, the one she had carried since the day she met Olatunji. She flipped through pages of pain, then healing, doubt, then daring. She smiled and began typing. The hall was full. Mama Ronk was seated in the front row, a gilly perched proudly on her head. She didn't understand much of what was in the book, but she understood what her daughter had become. The book was titled, "The Mirror in My Mind, A Guide to Rewriting Your Reality." Enitan stood before the crowd and read a passage. "You are not your worst thought. You are not your biggest fear. You are what you choose to believe. And belief, when chosen intentionally, becomes the soil of transformation." Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed, but Enitan wasn't looking at the lights. She was looking inward, into the same mirror that had once shown her only fog. Now she saw light. Months passed. The book became a quiet success. Not a bestseller in flashy numbers, but a bestseller in impact. Letters poured in. One from a teenage boy in Onitsha who stopped self-harming after reading her words. Another from a widow in Port Harcourt who started a business after years of crippling self-doubt. A prisoner in Kyuj prison wrote, "Your words built a window in my wall. I could see a future now." Enitan kept every letter, pinned them to a wall in her home, not as trophies, but as reminders. Reminders that when one mind heals, others can too. One evening, Mama Ronk sat with Enitan under the mango tree in their compound. The older woman was quieter these days, slower but softer. "I was wrong, Eni," she said. Enitan turned. "I thought I was protecting you from disappointment, but maybe I was just giving you my own." She placed a hand over her daughter's. "You have done more with your thoughts than I ever did with my strength." Enitan's eyes stung. "Mummy, you gave me the soil. I just had to learn what to grow in it." Years later, Enitan stood before a group of graduating students from the inner school. Some are now counselors. Others were writers. One had started her own program in Enugu. Enitan held up a small mirror. She passed it around. "Look," she said, "but don't look for your flaws. Look for your fight, your growth, your beauty." Each girl looked. Some cried. Some smiled. Some laughed. Then Enitan spoke. "Your mind is not a mirror to break. It is a garden to tend. You cannot control every thought that visits, but you can decide which ones stay. Guard your mind. Plant courage. Uproot lies. And shape the life you want, starting from the inside." Enitan's story became a ripple. From a classroom in Ijebu to a summit stage in Lagos, to a prison cell, to a daughter, to a world of mirrors and minds. And though Olatunji's gallery no longer stood, his mirror lived on. In every thought she shaped with love, in every heart she helped transform, and in every story she told. Moral of the story: your mind is the soil of your life. What you plant, water, and nurture, there becomes the reality you live. This story teaches that the most powerful voice in your life is the one in your head. If that voice is filled with fear, doubt, or other people's limitations, your reality will reflect it. But if you learn to guard your mind, speak intentionally, and plant thoughts of courage, growth, and truth, you can reshape your life from the inside out. Self-belief is not arrogance. It's planting truth where lies once grew. And even when self-doubt returns, as it often does, you can return to your inner mirror and rewrite the story. You become what you believe, so be intentional with what you allow your mind to hold. That brings us to the end of the story. What lesson did you take from it? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you'll know whenever we release a new video. Also, feel free to share this with someone who might enjoy it. Thank you so much.